All right, welcome back. So today, the 9th of August, is International Day of the World's Indigenous People. Now, it is observed every year around the world to protect the rights of the indigenous population. Now, this event acknowledges the achievements and contributions of the indigenous people. Now, the commemoration takes place in recognition of the inaugural session of the Working Group on Indigenous Populations at the United Nations in 1982 in Geneva. It was the first meeting where the UN body was tasked with drafting the Declaration of the Rights of the Indigenous People. So we're looking at people, like first settlers of a particular, land, society, place, and what have you. Yeah. And sometimes you find it very difficult, identifying who or, where they came from or who are actually the first settlers, because when you go back in history you try to identify okay, where did these people come from, or where are they from, or when you actually analyze the whole thing, you can sometimes say that everybody's kind of like a migrant, like we all moved from one place to another. But then we're going to be having that conversation here. You're also welcome to join us with your thoughts, opinions about indigenous people globally through our Facebook page, Africa Global Radio, or on Twitter, AF Global Radio. When tweeting, use the hashtag The Africa Daily Show. Well, the team is all set. Epi, Mami, Hafiz Gunu is right here as we delve into our discussions. So let me start with the man, Hafiz. Hafiz,
Charlie,
how are you?
I'm good.
Which position did you play last week?
What do you mean?
I'm just asking. You're a football player, aren't you?
I'm not.
No, you play not a professional football player, like the behind the yard.
No.
What?
An imaginary football player.
Oh, he plays. He plays.
It's street football.
It's been a while. Yes, street
it's
football.
not. It's not for the faint-hearted.
Right. So, but then even with that, what position do you play? What position do you play?
Wait,
Oh, God.
does he know he's the faint-hearted?
Please, what's your problem? But anyway, how are you?
I'm well.
Great. So we're talking World Indigenous, International Day. Obviously, marking International Day of, Indigenous people, early settlers, first-time settlers. Of the land. Some would say they are the original owners of the land.
Yeah.
Hmm?
Indigenous people.
Mm.
Well, conversations surrounding them usually you hear a lot of Native America, blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I'm going to draw inspiration from them anyway to kick off this conversation from the Native Americans and
Right.
With some bit of a sporting context, and hopefully make my way down to Africa.
Right.
And
No, you will. No, you have to. There's no way.
Why
if you don't have a plane ticket, get yourself on one of those ships.
Yeah.
Or the first transport. Get yourself. All right.
Hopefully make my way down to Africa, like I said, and I think hopefully later, Epi will bring the juice anyway.
Right.
But when you talk about indigenous people and the Native Americans, now when you go into the NFL,
Right.
like I said, I will start with the sporting context. When you go into the NFL, there's this team known as the Washington Redskins.
Okay.
Yes, that was the name before. Now, the name Redskins, now this was a team that was established somewhere in 1933.
Okay.
And they've used this for so long. Now, the term Redskins was something that irritated Native Americans.
Okay.
For some reason, they didn't like.
So they're the ones being referred to as Redskins, eh?
No, the team. They're just an NFL team.
Okay.
That has a nickname known as the Redskins. Yeah, they were based on Washington. First, I think they started in Boston, Massachusetts.
Okay.
Yeah. So they used the nickname Redskins, just much like Chelsea, the Blues, blah, 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 things. So they didn't like the fact that they were using that term.
The Native
Redskins.
Americans.
Yes.
Right.
It's almost like the N word for black folks. Yeah. So it dragged for so long because this was a team that started in 1933 for so long. Now, guess when this whole team name and logo was retired? Just last year.
What?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Just last year. And for you to be able to understand why this Redskin term irked them, you need to understand the historical context.
Right.
Now, in 1755, there was a dark chapter in American history where there was something known as the Phipps Proclamation.
Okay.
Yes, and it was named after a governor, a lieutenant governor in somewhere in Massachusetts,
Right.
thereabout, Spencer Phipps. Now, he put forward this proclamation encouraging civilians, basically, to track, murder, and scalp Native Americans wherever they see them. Yes. And so that was basically it put a bounty on the heads of Native Americans.
Yeah.
And for anybody that did it, you got paid handsomely too. So think of it like a state-sponsored genocide.
Yeah.
That was what it was. Now, for those that carried it out, here was the amount you were given. Now, £50 if you're able to get scalp an adult male, £25 for an adult female, and £20 for a boy or girl less than the age of 12 or under the age of 12.
And the reason is
They want to exterminate them. That's just it. Now, the bloody scalps was what was known as the Redskins.
okay.
So you can see where it all started
from. Right.
So anytime they make reference to this, because even in their football games, you get people paint themselves as Red Indians with a feather.
With a feather,
Yes.
yeah.
And didn't like it until it happened that they decided to retire the name and the logo. And all this happened because, well, someone called Columbus found the land and said he had discovered the land. So,
That was after he discovered the land, I believe. That was after he discovered the land.
yes, after he discovered
Yeah.
it. Now, Maud.
Right, continue.
Anyway,
Right.
So now let's come down to Africa. Like I said. Now, when you come down to Africa, there's this erroneous impression that is created that Africans were colonized because we weren't smart, or basically they outsmarted us.
Yeah.
And I mean, that couldn't be further away from the truth.
Okay.
Okay, it is nothing like the truth. Because you see, someone said that if true American and British history was taught in schools,
Yeah.
children would need therapy. That's
Dear Lord. That's a huge one, huh?
yeah.
Right.
So that's how, because these are the people that were globetrotting. They pillaged like barbarians. You would expect barbarians would, and raped and did all kinds of things, burned stuff down. So how is that being smart? Anyway,
That's been wicked.
these are barbarians, and I'll tell you how. Now, somewhere in 1884 and 1885.
Right.
Now, there was something called the Berlin Conference.
Yeah.
Some know it as the Congo Conference.
Yeah.
Where basically Westerners sat down, Europeans sat down and apportioned Africa
To themselves. Yeah. You take this
So
place.
you take Nigeria, you take Ghana, you take Liberia, that kind of thing.
A land that people
Exactly.
Yeah.
That was what it.
Anyway.
Yes. And now I'm going to even divert the whole thing to Nigerian history. Now, here's the thing. Within 20 years of doing this,
After the Berlin Conference.
yes,
Right.
they were able to take over Nigeria within 20 years. Now, they did this not because they were smart, like I say, because they were barbarians. They did this with the help of... Because once they apportioned these places to themselves, they decided, okay, they wanted to do this, and they faced a lot of resistance from some kings.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
King Jaja of Opobo.
Opobo, Nigeria.
Yes, yeah. I think in Sokoto, Atairu or so. Yes. They faced all kinds of resistance from these kings, and they needed a way to subdue them. And what did they do? They decided that they were going to use a particular weapon, and that weapon was the game changer, the Maxim gun. They called it. Yes. Now the Maxim gun was what tilted, changed the whole complexion of the fight, because what happened was that when the Maxim gun is fired, and this was actually the engineering of a British inventor known as Sir Hiram Maxim. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and in 60 seconds, I think it could fire about 600 rounds of fire.
What?
Yeah.
60 seconds.
60 seconds, a minute.
Wow.
Yes, 600
Whoa.
rounds
At that time.
at that time.
Oh wow.
So imagine coming up against people that were spears and
Swords and what have you. Yeah, bow and arrow and what have you.
so it meant that if it hits 70% of its target, you are looking at some 400 soldiers
Yeah.
being killed and everything. Yes, and same as with and this was something that they used in their wars anytime they invaded places, and this was basically the game changer. It wasn't like they were smart and calculating. No, this was what they were doing. If you take the Gatling gun, another gun that happened, that was I think the invention of Richard Gatling. Okay, similar fashion in Southern Africa, killed some 1,000+ people of the Ndobele warriors. Okay, and they lost just 4 warriors. 4 soldiers act against 1,000 plus, and recently they
That's not a
had
fair fight.
yeah.
Mm.
So in all of this, I'm giving this context. Why? Because if you see all of this, I mean, this gun or this weapon was enough to squash any form of indigenous rebellion or resistance to any form of, attempts at trying to colonize. And that for me was the game changer.
Right.
So in Africa, yes, we've had all these conversations about people. Yeah.
Yeah, for the purpose of our listeners and viewers, so the image, we will be displaying the image of these guns he's mentioning, the Gatling gun.
Yes, the Maxim and the
The
Gatling
Maxim and the Gatling and the Gatling gun, right?
Yeah. So I mean, these proved to be game changers. Now, interesting enough, in their history, like I said, someone said that children will need therapy anyway. But in their history, before World War One, there was no mention of these guns.
Right.
Why? Because, well, I mean, think about it. If people back home were to read stories of their soldiers with such incredible firepower up against people that had spears and all kinds of crude weapons, what would the story look like? There's no glory in that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so.
All right, the show is Africa Daily on Africa Global Radio, bringing context to the discussion. Half is gonna, give an historical, what do you call it, parts of the whole thing, talking about how the Westerners use the force they use in actually eliminating local inhabitants of places they actually took control of, by virtue of just allocating places and land to themselves and everything. But anyway, it's not just about, the U.S. where we talk about the indigenous, what do you call it, Red Indians and what have you. We have similar. I mean, recently I come across some articles where some people actually talking about, the indigenous Australians, it's kind of like, they actually exist and everything. And there's this lady that came out with this record sometime, rap tune, and was talking about the fact that they are being subdued and they're not even recognized anymore. Big problem. So we're going to be looking at that, all of those right here on the Africa Daily Show, as well as, bringing it back to Africa, where, of course, for our case, because of the vast diversity, I think it's just about the how do you call it, the Westerners coming in to actually tell us where and what to do. But because for me, I believe we are just one people living on our land. We've always owned where we were and all. But then let me go to Epi.
Barry.
Yeah, indigenous people.
Indigenous people with interesting history that scares you. Very disturbing. I think we all know that Christopher Columbus, I mean, the man who says he discovered the Americas.
Right.
I don't know what he actually founded anyway.
Yeah, he said he founded the land.
I mean, you travel for
America.
3 months and you land on East Indies, and then you say you found the land when there were people already living in that land. It doesn't make any sense. But then, I mean, moving on, he even finding the land is not what makes it a problem. It's, I mean, what happened to the people that stayed in the land there, the native Indian Americans, as you call them. And these people actually own the land. And the people that, they lived like in a nomadic lifestyle. We can move today, we can move peaceful. Nothing urban, that kind of disturbing thing. They don't have no war, that sort of a thing. But then because their lands were good, and most of the whites that were coming in wanted the land, they had to find a way to get rid of them.
Right.
And what made it even worse for them and made it possible for them to get rid of them was the 7th president of the United States. You're talking of Andrew Jackson. I mean, he actually was president from 1829 to 1837. And he brought about the Indian removal law. And this allowed the fact that they could take Indians out of their lands, force them off their land, so that American farmers could grow cuttings on the land and become wealthy people there.
Right.
And then they pushed them on what you call the Trail of Tears. So they had to move from Tennessee, from Ohio, Oklahoma. They were literally traveling from their land to look for places they could settle. Cold, hot, they still had to move. Imagine walking, I mean, with just a blanket, with a baby, and it's snowing. No shelter.
Terrible experience, obviously. Yeah.
From your land. just because somebody wants it. And at a point between the French and then the Indian War, there's a point that they actually wanted to take them off. And then also when Britain was part of the war, some of the Creek Indians were helping Britain. Because, I mean, they didn't like what they were doing to them. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. So that's how it was like for them. And then America decided that let's turn against these people and take them out. So they had to find different means and different ways. Now, there have been suggestions in different case, only that it's just been mentioned once in one account, as one of the generals mentioned that they actually did give them the smallpox infected blankets. And you know, the smallpox virus actually, it leaves scars on your body. It's that bad. So they give them blankets that is infected with smallpox, and then it gives them the virus, and before you would actually be able to cure yourself, it's terrible. And these were diseases or viruses that the native Indians or Native Americans did not have until the influx of the white people who wanted their land. So it's just a continuous injustice being perpetrated against the people. They just move on from one person to the other. And until the late 19s, they were granted voting rights, and then also currently allowed. But still, some of them are under the protection of what America calls the Indian Reservation. So then they can vote, but if you go to certain communities present day, some of them are still being oppressed. And is that bad?
I don't even know why. That's the big question for me. But I'll get back to that. The show is Africa Daily on Africa Global Radio. Thank you, Epi. And let's get over to Maud. Maud.
Hi, Barry.
Yeah. Do you have a friend who's a Native American? No.
I don't have a friend who is a native.
Right.
Anybody.
Australia? The Aborigines?
Do you have indigenous friends? No.
Right?
No, he's asking me why. Do you have indigenous friends?
I can't ask why.
No, I'm just asking you a question. Do you have indigenous friends?
Why are you catching feelings?
Anyway, Maud, let's hear your take and then we can move on.
Okay, so I will look at the indigenous Australians. You mentioned it before you moved to Epi. Going back to the history books, right? These indigenous people were storytellers.
Right.
They were semi-nomadic people. It's like they moved. They were hunters and then farmers.
Right.
Who moved from time to time. They had permanent homes in a certain place.
Okay.
But then they moved from time to time, and then when they wanted to grow crops, they came back to their homes.
Okay.
And they passed on their history to their children through a belief system that used songs, dance, paintings, and all of that. So like Epi mentioned about the native Indians, these were peaceful people who just hunted for animals and then tilled the land.
Okay.
That was until the British came.
Until these guys arrive. We
It's like-
have arrived by the order of the Queen. This land belongs to us. Oh dear.
So the colonization of Australia started in 1788. When these people came to Australia, there were about 750,000 people living on the land.
Right.
And by 1900, the number had reduced to 93,000.
So they were being eliminated. Is that the case?
Yes. And according to the report that I read, so they were killed using killer diseases. So I read it and I'm like, how do you move from a place and then carry along killer diseases like tuberculosis, like the smallpox that Epi mentioned? How were they carried in bottles? Were they carried in tubes?
Well, whichever way or however way they carried it, they still carried it. To the people.
So you read it and you're like, well,
The thing is, why? You get me?
I think it's all because of the agenda. And this is what it is to conquer and then acquire the land for themselves. I mean, it's not just these diseases that kill these people. Some of them were driven off their lands. Some had their children taken from them.
Right.
So many atrocities were done to these people just so the British could acquire the land.
Okay, but just so you can acquire the land, unfortunately, quite an unpleasant history there.
So the population started to recover in the early 1900s.
Okay.
And then by 2011, there was an estimated 669,900
Right.
indigenous people living in Australia right now. Now we're looking at what the situation is like.
Okay.
In as much as we find ourselves in a developed world, racial discrimination is still happening in Australia. I mean, even though it became illegal in 1976, it hasn't protected Indigenous people because, including terms of health, education, and employment, because today in Australia, Indigenous kids are 24 times more likely to be locked up than their non-Indigenous classmates.
That is absolutely very sad.
It's very sad because, I mean, this is our land.
It still beats. I still find it very difficult to comprehend why they try to eliminate them. Number one, for those who actually, left, they deprive them.
Do you think it's just human nature? Remember
want
the
to-
story of Liberia?
Okay, the ones that were actually,
Freed slaves.
They came over and they were
came
freed from
over.
the other one. Okay.
Now, for people that went through all the atrocities at the hands of their slave masters,
Thinking they would rather.
you would think that they would know better. What did they do?
They did the same thing.
They did the same to the Indians. And took over
But what?
and treated them in anyway. So
I think it's just
Human
just
nature?
greed. It's
I think, I think it's greed. Yeah,
It's just,
it is greed. It is actually greed because how?
it's not like you people do not have a place to live.
Yeah.
It's like it's different from
Can't we
saying
live
I
in
don't
New-
have a place to live,
Yeah.
so I'm moving to a different place to settle. And even with that, you should be able to live peacefully with the people you went to meet there.
They want what the people have. Green
But-
and
That's what I'm saying. It's
But
just
the
greed.
same
This is
thing-
not human nature. This is just
human nature. It's
basic greed.
But I think in the context of the continent of Africa, I think it was the other way around. Rather, we didn't have, in as much as there were some killings. I think it was more of let's just rule you people, not totally eliminate you people. Not until they actually started rebelling. You get
But
me? Not
How,
until
how were they supposed to do that?
That's the
Because
thing.
you see, it wasn't about being smart. Of course, they attempted certain things like some asked certain kings to sign some very shitty treaties and everything.
Yeah.
Like the one from the Royal Niger Company.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's Unilever.
Yes, yes, we know it as Unilever. Anyway.
Yeah.
So they tried some of these things. Of course, some kings that saw through what exactly they were trying to do said no.
Resisted, right?
Resisted. And in fact, when it came down to it, it was like, well, if we have to battle it out, we'll do it. But then the game changers were in there, machine guns and everything. So, I mean, it's one thing to say that okay, you are here to spread the gospel.
Yeah.
To do this.
But
to do that.
but like I'm saying,
At the end of the day-
why I am actually saying is a different case all around in Africa is that at least the indigenous people on the continent of Africa from various ethnic groups are still the ones actually manning affairs now. The president of South Africa is from South Africa, an indigenous person.
You think?
Oh please! No, I don't know if you get. Okay. What's up? Where is he driving at? No, I don't know if you get my point. I don't know if you get because no. When was the last time you saw a president who's
Are you
actually
actually
native Indian
Are
in
you
the
actually
U.S.?
free?
I don't know. Let's be frank here. Epi, have you? When was the last time the president or a president of the United States was a native Indian? No.
You see, it doesn't have to be. These days, it takes a different form. It doesn't have to take your physical presence.
No, I know
You can
that's why you.
tell it
I know that's why you said that. Like, the mentality, right?
Exactly.
No, but that's not the
It's
thing.
different.
Oh, so you're still,
but it's still
so
the
you're,
same
you're still being controlled there. By the
Oh,
external
that is
forces.
happening. That is happening.
on the
But I think Barry is
So
talking
far.
about the fact that they came, but they didn't drive us off our land.
Exactly,
You know,
something like
because
that.
they
That's
took-
exactly
it's
what
like
I'm
they
looking
came
at.
and then they took the
You
people.
know.
Continue is 90% black. Where are these
No, but then even with regards to our own, our land was not a land we were that adapted to. Let's not forget, aside the mosquitoes and then also tilling this land was something we were mainly
So it's like
used to.
leave them for
And they
them
met organized groups. I mean, these were kingdoms that had warriors that fought for them. So it's not like you were getting it that easy. So then if you're not ready for the battle, you go. Unlike these red Indians, the people were peaceful. They didn't even anticipate that someone is coming to come and claim that we have discovered your land and we are coming to fight.
Yeah, I mean, people just like the native Australians. These are people who told stories by
That's
the
the thing.
firelight
Yeah.
at night.
And they just
That's one of the sounds they make, you know. I really like
These
it.
are peaceful people.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes you watch movies and you see these red Indian. Sorry, You see these Native Americans, right? And then you see how peaceful they are.
Yeah, yeah.
So people for war.
Yes.
It's quite sad. So,
There was nothing like organized battalion.
It's all about conquering and taking the land for yourself. And fine, you've conquered. Okay, champion. Leave us alone. You want to eliminate us again. Problematic. But it happens. I get where you're coming from. In as much as we're still the ones in a fair president and Akufo-Addo, there's some invisible forces behind that.
Your words, not mine. So.
No, but that is what it sounded like. That is what it sounded like. I don't know if you get me.
When we don't talk about it, we see it. Because we talk about the nation, we're always going to these people for foreign aid, and then the foreign aid comes with a lot of conditions. So it's just there.
It's because like feeding breast milk. Every time you go back for nest, you go and nest and come back.
So I think the indigenous people, which is and for us, for here on the continent of Africa, different countries and all of that, we know that the presidents are from the countries and blah blah blah. But how about those, like for instance, the Australian case, like that, the case of the U.S. and other places?
Well, I think it's also good to provide context to the fact that these days they've tried to, in a way, say they want to atone for the sins of the past.
Okay.
Let's be real. Nothing they would ever do would completely make up for everything they did.
They paid some money, my mates people. Yeah.
So.
Did you get your cash? Did you get your say?
So, recently we've seen them try to, because every now and then the conversation surrounding reparations comes up. That's how much money. Can
pay for the damage.
Can pay for the damage.
Returning the.
I think on the same platform, we some of us got excited about Namibia receiving something from Germany.
Yeah.
For the atrocities they committed against, I think, the Herero and the Dombele people.
Is it Germany or Belgium?
Germany.
Germany. Namibia, Belgium. Yeah, Germany. Right.
So, this whole talk. And you're asking, is it enough? If they don't do anything, wait, they do something to. So that's the question. So
very sad.
But then, and there are times too. Well, these days, you see in certain jurisdictions, so they try to put out certain legislations that would protect, these groups.
Right.
Yes. Epi mentioned the submission about the Removal Act of 1830. Yes, and this was basically an act that sought to remove them from the east of the Mississippi River to the west. And it's had to take the doing of the president, and it wasn't really well thought out. But I think these days one of the laws that sort of protects them is the Indian Bill of Rights. Yes. Something like that, and there's also every now and then there's been the Truth and Reconciliation Commissions. Yes, to try to work things out and talk some of these things out.
Try to mend some of the damages. You cannot do it all, but at least the best you can do. But I think these people really need to be recognized. Whatever basic things that they require to earn a living, to make their life better, I think they should be part and parcel of even nation building and decision making and everything. But unfortunately, that is not the case. All right.
But even quickly, even in the case of South Africa, remember what was happening there? Okay, the colonialists would, in the pecking order, you had Indians there second before Black Africans.
Yeah.
And these are people,
Yeah, that's true.
So why was that?
Oh dear. You people should just stay put and let us handle affairs. Hey! Now, wow. Thank you very much, guys. That's all time will permit us to go with our discussion zone. You can still share your thoughts with us whilst watching this video on YouTube or via our WhatsApp number +233 2070646880. The show is Africa Daily on Africa Global Radio.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it, subscribe, and share.